Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to continuing our discussions with Michael Knight from Artist Strength and Michael Paul, Macro Mike. Good to have you guys. As we sit here recording today, it's January 11th. Everybody's still, I would say, making an assumption, kind of hyper-focused on their, 2022 goals. The average person, I think, gains 8 to 10 pounds from Thanksgiving to Christmas. So I think everybody's kind of in a mode to kind of shed that weight along with their COVID weights, right, off of their thing. I don't know where Michael Knight went, but he'll be back. We're going to talk a little bit about working out, which we've been talking about with Michael Knight. But Macro Mike, let's talk about, I think everybody wants to know how to eat and what that means for them. And, is it intermittent fasting? Is it keto? Is it Weight Watchers? Is it this? What's the path?
Great question, John. Glad to be here again. You're correct. A lot of people do tend to gain a little bit of weight during the holidays, and certainly that's been exacerbated by COVID. So as we enter the new year and people look to address that, as you mentioned, intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet, there are a lot of different types of approaches out there, and that's what they are. It's an approach. It's a tool, and it can be useful for some individuals at certain times. In general, an intermittent fasting approach can be useful for people that are disciplined, and if they're very busy, meaning for them, for instance, a resident at a hospital, they don't have much time to sit down and eat several meals per day. So for them, fasting for an extended period during the day may make sense. So they'll eat a larger meal earlier in the day and then maybe one later in the day, and then that's it. They'll fast overnight, or they'll fast, scale back their calories 5 days a week, and then on the weekends go back to maintenance level, as opposed to a ketogenic approach.
Which, before you go there, before you talk about keto, let's talk about intermittent fasting again, because are you familiar with Prolon?
Prolog?
Yeah, Prolon, Prolon.
I don't think so. What is it?
Oh, it's like a 5-day cleanse that they then have these bars that kind of supposedly keep the intermittent fasting going. But if you don't know about it, we won't talk about it. All right, so talk about keto.
Well, shortly on that, I am familiar with things like that. So not that particular one. Again, the approach for intermittent fasting, it can be useful for certain individuals, but it is not a long-term approach. And I would say the same thing with keto. I would say the same thing with almost any type of diet tool other than a good, well-balanced, sensible approach to diet or eating that supports a lifestyle, as opposed to trying to reduce body fat in the shortest possible amount of time, as an example. Which feeds directly into the ketogenic approach, which, as most people know, is severely restricting the amount of carbohydrates down to somewhere between 20 and 50 grams per day, getting a very large amount of fat in the diet, and then some proteins. So, therein lies some of the difficulties with it. Very high amounts of fat can lead to certain health issues, as well as cravings if people that are not getting enough carbohydrates. But that also leads to why some people see success in the short term on a ketogenic diet, because their bodies are going to use up the glycogen that's stored in the body, and they're going to dump a lot of water weight. So within the first week or so, people see multi-pound reductions in body weight. That doesn't mean they're losing body fat. Right? They're dropping water weight. And any of these approaches can lead to issues, especially with individuals that are susceptible to food cravings, right? Because if they're not getting a macronutrient, for instance, carbohydrates in the ketogenic approach, or if they're not getting any nutrients for extended periods of time, that could lead to hunger, can lead to cravings, it can lead to binge eating and other issues. So again, the better approach, or the more recommended approach, is certainly one that takes all of the nutrients into consideration, folds that into a sensible lifestyle approach to eating.
Let me ask you this, something you said about water weight versus losing fat. what's the difference, and how do you lose, just kind of talk about the difference of what that is and what that means.
Well, in the case of a ketogenic diet, when someone switches over from eating, quote, normal amounts of carbohydrates to restricting them, the body's going to burn off or utilize the glycogen that's stored in the muscle. As it does that, the body will move water out of the muscle. So that's the water weight reduction. And typically, when the body stores 1 gram of glycogen, it's going to store 2.5 to 3 grams of water. So you get a significant reduction in water weight as that glycogen gets utilized. Okay, that's not burning body fat. That's not utilizing body fat for energy. It's just simply burning off the glycogen for day-to-day activities or for exercise, and then the water weight along with it.
Yeah.
That's why people feel so great after a few days, like, oh, I've dropped 5 pounds, but they haven't lost necessarily any body fat. They just simply dumped a bunch of water weight.
How do you lose body fat? Maybe that's a question for you and Michael Knight, right? What's the expectation? What's the journey?
In general, to lose body fat, you need to go into a caloric deficit. There's a lot of discussion out there in terms of how much of a deficit. Whether or not you can still burn body fat and do what's called a body recomposition, which means building muscle and losing fat essentially at the same time. Yes, that can be done, but the training needs to be specific, and the approach to the eating needs to be specific and disciplined. In general, it's easier for people to lose body fat by going into a caloric deficit, meaning they're eating less than what they're burning. Now, there's a way to do that. You can reduce calories, but you can also do that by reducing calories only a bit, but increasing activity. And in general, that's the better approach. You get a slight reduction in calories, you get an increase in exercise. The net effect of those two add to a reduction in overall calories that are available to the body. So you're going to burn body fat. Simple. Simple.
Michael Knight, what about you?
You know what, John, I've had Mike for several years, and it's not a one size fits all. And that's what's so incredible about Mike, is that when he does an assessment on one of my clients or one of my athletes, it's individualized. And again, I go back to the first time I ever saw one of his food plans for me, and I just shook my head and I just went, oh my, it looks like something out of a chemistry equation. But again, you're asking him for the highest quality of life in certain instances. With me, because I'm, a high-end athlete. But for some people, it's just a matter of getting the calories that fit your needs, not 1,400, not 1,600, but he'll break it down specifically on your activity levels, how much you're working out, how strong you are at this time, and he'll make adjustments going forward. But again, in this world, I know if you're triplets, it's still going to look different for all three of you. Yeah. It's not a one size fits all. Make the investment in someone like Michael or someone that can get you the answer. But again, we are talking about our lives, and we only get one go around at this.
So let's just talk let's talk step one for a minute, right? Let's talk step one workout, step one eating change, the 1, 2, or 3 things you can do to change before having to go, 100% hardcore, right? So I think that's where people, many times I see, it's like, it's an all or nothing mindset, but let's ease people into eating. Let's ease people into a workout. For example, what I'm asking is, all right, throw away all the potato chips in your cupboard as a step one. Step two, Michael Knight, go for a walk for 5 minutes every day. And then after, give people kind of like the beginning steps.
With me coming into my place, John, it's going to be very, very, very simple, because we are building a foundation for the rest of your life. It's not a 30-day. We don't want to, make you feel like you're dead or you're out of shape. My job is to make you feel like you can do this. It's going to be very, very simple. We just want to see how you move, how you squat. Can you do a push-up? Can you do a lunge? Can you pull something? Can you push something? And can you carry something? From there, it's like I give them a daily food journal for a couple of weeks before I even turn them over to Mike, because I want to see what they're doing and just start educating them on what I know from what I've learned from Mike, making it very simple, because again, everybody wants to jump into the deep end. we want to go into the kiddie pool first with our workouts and with Mike, because it can be overwhelming, John.
Let's talk about a food journal. You know, anytime I gain weight, I'm always surprised. But then when I start writing down what I eat, I think, oh, no wonder I've gained, 10, 15 pounds, right? And, it's amazing how quickly calories add up, or you realize you're eating the wrong thing. And then when you start eating the right thing, you think, wow, I would have, if I wasn't disciplined to do this, I would have probably eaten 2,000 more calories today in addition to what I ate, and thought I ate nothing. Right. So just talk about the discipline of writing down your food and maybe what apps work for people the best.
So that's a great point. And that is one of the things that I do with clients that have never followed a prescriptive plan before. Ask them to invest in a food scale if they don't have one, and start weighing out their food. It helps them to understand what portion size is and how to estimate it going forward.
Yeah.
But yes, most people, especially if they're eating the normal standard American diet type of foods, which are very calorically dense, they're getting a lot of calories sometimes in a very small portion of food, as opposed to individuals that start eating a healthy diet.
Yeah.
They're surprised at the volume of food they actually get to eat. Right. Because there's not a lot of hidden calories, hidden fats, sugars, and things that their body doesn't need.
Yeah.
So they're able to eat larger volumes, get more nutrient-dense foods. They feel more satiated. They have more energy, less mood swings from hormone repercussions and so on. So it's a much better approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that's a great exercise. As a business coach, I work on a lot of things with clients, but one of the things is time management. And I've traveled many places around the country and done keynotes. I mean, I talk a lot about time management, but one of the things I always say to people is track your time for 3 days. It will be an absolute eye opener of what you're doing. And same thing with eating, right? When and sometimes I find myself like debating with myself, like, well, it's 8 o'clock. I don't have to write this down, so you have to, you like starting to negotiating with yourself. Right.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things too, John, that makes it easy is that people, when they start counting their calories, they feel like they have to do that the rest of their life. And like Mike says, get that scale, make that first investment. If you do a lifestyle change, your food groups in the foods you eat are going to kind of like be the same all the time. So your job in the beginning when you're counting calories is just to get an eyeful of, hey, this is what it looks like. And then you're going to have hold of it. So you don't have to do that all the time. You don't have to count calories at the beginning. You might have to, but overall, just get an idea. And then you can, start eyeballing it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And once people start doing that and they get the ability to estimate portion size correctly, they can do that going forward. They don't have to weigh their food all of the time because their estimates have gotten a lot better. Yeah. And then at some point in time, they may need to do a slight course correction, especially around the holidays. As we indicated, weight tends to tick up a little bit. That can be fine. Come New Year's, you just do a course correction, you reset, do what you've already learned how to do. The weight comes off, and you're off to the races. You're good.
Right. You reach out to your resources, right? So like Adrienne is talking about, when she gets off track, she gets back on your program, right? And so I think it's really, really important to, have the resources around you that you can, that you can pull from. But then there's people who have the means, and then there's people who don't have the means. And so I always like on this show to give both options. And so, what are both options?
For individuals who want to start off on their own, don't have a lot of resources, what I would suggest is start keeping track, not in great detail, but keep a little bit track of what they're eating so that it stays consistent, and then weigh themselves. Okay, if their weight doesn't change, then they're basically have already balanced their intake versus their output. Okay, because their weight isn't changing. Then get a little bit more active. Go for a walk once a day or several days out of the week. So now they're starting to burn a little bit more calories. What impact is that having on their weight? Make small adjustments in the foods they're getting. Cut out the sugar-laden pops, cut out the snacks and candies and things like that, and just start incorporating a little bit more, nutrient-dense sourced foods. Very small changes, making sure you're well hydrated, getting adequate rest. You don't need someone like me to say, what's good or not good. These are very simple changes, and people will notice an impact on the improvement in the quality of their lives.
It's great. Michael Knight.
The same thing, John, is just keep it very simple. There's not probably in my 25 years of, being at 336 and given those 3 words, change or die, I tried everything, but I never had, I didn't have that sensor. I didn't have a Michael Paul, so we tried everything that was a calorie deficit, but mine were too big and they were not sustainable. So again, be patient. The only thing that does work in this world is, like Michael said, is a calorie deficit, and just move a little bit more. So it doesn't have to be drastic, because if you do drastic, it's going to be unsustainable, and we're going to go backwards and not being able to hold on to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your guys' insights. Tell everybody where they can connect with you.
With me, it's always 248-231-3732. I answer the phone.
Yeah, I love that. I do the same. I always give my cell and answer my own phone.
Yep.
And Art of Strength is an incredible workout, and so I just want to kind of give props on that. Michael Paul, how can people connect with you?
Mike at macromikes.com or through the cell phone 810-459-1044.
All right, I love it, guys. I really appreciate you both coming on the show. One last piece of advice before we go. Michael Knight.
Rip the Band-Aid off. John, it's not normal that we've gotten to this point. Some people, once you get off 1 or 2 weeks, it's kind of tough to jump back on the track. And the biggest thing is a lot of people have gone a lot longer than that. So please, everybody, just take the Band-Aid off and go for a walk and just make an effort to get out of bed and start getting that our ritual in our place just moving. Just move.
I love it. Michael Paul, one piece.
I agree. Get moving, get started, start small, whatever you need to do. As you progress, reach out to, others around you who have been successful, other resources such as Mike Knight or myself or others, but get started.
Yeah, it's a great way to end. All right, guys, thank you very much. Here's to a healthy 2022 for everybody. And I always appreciate you guys being on the show. Think community. If Michael Knight or Michael Paul can help you, please reach out. And thanks, guys. Appreciate you both.
Thanks, John. Always enjoy it.